Hi, everyone. This is Zorina Dimitrova, the host of the New Game of Leadership Online Summit. I have the pleasure to have Mike Amato with me today. Some of you have seen him in other webinars that we've had together, but today he's coming with a very cool topic, an upgraded knowledge and upgraded intelligence, as he shared just now. So be prepared for an amazing webinar. Today's topic is, let me just read it. Crack the code to your career growth with stunning results. And I can attest that we've already had stunning results at the beginning of this webinar. So shall I introduce you, Mike, for the people that don't know you, or would you take this
No, please,
away?
please.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear what you were going to say about me.
For yet another time.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah. So some of you have read already the bio that Mike has published on his website, but I'll present him from my perspective. So Mike is currently a successful winery owner. His wines are very exclusive, and he's been doing really great with the wines. He's also an executive coach, but prior to becoming an executive coach, he was a CEO in major banks in Santander and in Barclays Global. And he climbed the career ladder very fast. I don't know if it was fast, but it was really from grassroots. So in a committed way, let's put it this way. And I've heard quite a few stories on what qualities you've had and how you managed to actually climb up. And it had a lot to do with your focus on people, on the relationship you had with people. But I'm curious to what you have added to this today. Yeah.
Wonderful.
So
Zarina,
thank you so much for joining us.
you bet. It's always a pleasure to work with you, Zarina. You are a world-class talent, I gotta say, and it's just any time we can work together, I will always do so. So thanks for inviting me to be here today.
Thank you.
As Zarina said, I do a number of things. So I've got a portfolio of things that I'm doing now, but the roots of my story come from. I'll tell you a little bit more detail about my career. I want you to understand my journey, because when people think about getting advice, getting mentoring, and I like the phrase mentoring versus coaching only because whereas a coach is providing information to the person being coached, there's very little exchange of personal experience and personal knowledge or even intervention into certain things. Whereas a mentor, I'm free to work with my clientele and actually share maybe similar experiences and similar challenges, give some advice about a couple of things that somebody might do to get out of a situation. So it's a more in-depth relationship, and everybody that I work with ends up being my friend at the end. And so I've been in touch with people that I've mentored years and years ago, and still to this day. I got a message from one person today. So my point is that I do some mentoring. I do a number of things. As Zarina said, starting off with the portfolio of things that I'm doing. One of the things in 2005, we planted a vineyard here in Washington State, and as it turned out, it was in the very top grape growing region, and one of the top actually in the world. And so we produce some really fine wines, and we sell them throughout the United States, mostly here in the Seattle area. By the way, I'm in Seattle. But in addition to that, I'm on the board of directors of a bank in the UK called Tandem Bank. And let me kind of go back though and say, how did that happen? Because it's very relevant context for the topic today. As Zarina said, we're going to be talking about how to grow your career. And sometimes it's hard to crack the code. There's clearly some code at work, and some people just fly, other people kind of bump along or maybe get stalled, even with outstanding performance. So what's going on there, and how can we address that and talk about that? So my background started in a banking career, over 35 years ago. And I started literally by answering the telephone. And as the organization grew, I was able to grow with it. And my career path sort of wound around a little bit and came back and forth, but it was always with a purpose in mind. And it took me about 21 years, but after 21 years, I became the co-president of the 6th largest bank in America. And in that process, I learned so many things about challenging bosses, executive strategies that I disagreed with. There's certainly a lot of things I agreed with. I had disappointments I had to overcome, and all of that began to build a knowledge base that I'm able to share with people I work with every single day. There's so many things I learned, and actually the challenges that I went through in growing the career. I'm grateful that Zorina said it was a fast career growth. It's relatively fast, but let me tell you, it's like riding the tooth of a saw. There's some bumps along the way, and several times I thought I was just never going to make it. So that process was enormously beneficial to me in learning there is a way to navigate the politics of an organization. There is a way to announce my candidacy for the next role and become a high performer at the same time that does that. So as I went through my career, became the co-president, the bank then changed their strategy pretty significantly. And to be very direct, what they want to do is get into more and more subprime lending and created some really big challenges for the entire, actually it turned out to be the entire global economy. And my values were not aligned with that. And that's the best way to say it is, it's a strategy, but it's also strategy underwritten by values. And one thing I don't do is compromise values. So I left the organization, was recruited to go join Barclays in London. And so I was the head of the global product and distribution. I was executive for global product and distribution, meaning we had 33,000 branches all over the world and about 30,000 colleagues. So again, why is that important? It's important because in the process of doing that role, there's a lot of people that I hired. Okay, so I know what it's like to as an executive to bring somebody on board from senior level to sometimes entry level positions. I love to be involved. Of course, I didn't not too involved at the entry level positions, but the point of it is that I'm intensely interested in watching somebody come into my office and say they want a different role and kind of deciding should we hire them or should we not. I've also helped people get promoted. One of the things that I was really interested in, it was our frontline had 70% female, and yet our executive management was like under 10%. And so changing that and helping women understand how to navigate a world that was created largely and the rules written largely by men was something that I really enjoyed doing. And when I left, we had a significant boost. Almost 50% of the executives then when I left were female. So the point was, again, I'm passionate about helping people grow their career and become very, very successful, but in ways that are consistent with who they are and in ways that are consistent with their values. And always we win when the values of the individual match the values of the organization. So you'll hear me talk a lot about values. I've even invited, there's been several times when I've had to invite people not to work in my part of the organization. And that's the unfortunate side of being an executive, is sometimes you have to move people out. And so that experience though taught me some different things. What did people do that created challenges? What are things that people do to kind of cause their career to stall to the point that I had to invite them to go seek a career somewhere else? So that led then to me, I resigned, retired, pardon me, as in that role. And then I went to the board of directors of Santander, one of the biggest banks in the world, in the UK. And then joined the board of Tandem Bank, where I am now. So I'm no longer on the board of Santander. Again, another view on how do boards think about talent and how do we think about individuals. And we're going to talk more about this later on in detail, but there is even at the executive level, even when I mentor a CEO, you can see the differences in how people think about things and the things they do that can derail them from being their most effective and successful selves, and the things that they do that accelerate their growth. So today I want to talk about those things with all of you and share some stories and share some of this, hard-fought wisdom, but give you some ideas about some ways to think about your role in creating your career. And again, that career might be, you might want to become the next level. You may want to be a senior manager. You might be a senior manager today and you want to become the CEO. That's great. We can talk about that. You might be somebody who's in sales who wants to get into management. You might be in management who wants to get into sales. And you may want to start your own business, leave the organization altogether and start your own business. All of that's very, very relevant to our conversation today, because I've sort of consolidated my thoughts around things that people can avoid, and things that by talking about the things they can avoid, it starts to point to things that they can really do to magnify and accelerate things. So I've got written down 3 of the the biggest career limiters. So 3 of the things that people do that really hold them back. And in this process, you're going to see some clues in terms of my unique approach to mentoring people and helping them not only discover how to be more successful in the role they're in, not only talk about how to change and alter their personal brand so that they can go to the role that they want to go into, but also how do you balance what you know, who you are as an individual, who you are as a person, and how do you balance that whole idea about work-life balance? All of them are attainable. They're all attainable, and I'll show you how. All right. So the first thing is, I want to talk about the 3 biggest limiters, and I've kind of cheated a little bit because number 1 is a biggie. Number 1's a very biggie. But what I've written down here is one of the key things is that the and I don't know how well you can read it, but I've written down no strategy and no plan. And again, sorry if you can't read that, but trust me, it says no strategy and no plan. And by that, what I mean is this. And executives, we're always thinking about the organization, where we were going to go, and how do we communicate? How did I communicate with 30,000 people, and really, frankly, launch one of the biggest banking transformations in the entire UK, actually in history. And so, how did we do that? Well, we thought about who we are, what we were going to do, why we're going to do it, and how we're going to do it. What does that mean corporately? It means that there is a vision. That's what we're going to do. And there's a mission. That's why we're going to do it. That's what we stand for. And then there's a strategy. That's how we're going to do it. Okay. And then finally, there's a plan that says what are the things we're going to need to do in order to make that happen. So they all kind of roll up. We call that process strategic alignment. Now, what's kind of surprising to me is I see people with no strategic alignment for their career. Remember, your job, if you want to move up in an organization and be seen as a valued contributor, we use a 9-box grid to analyze the top talent. One axis is performance from low to high, potential from low to high. We see somebody that really has room to grow. And then we have performance from low to high. And what we're shooting for is a high performer with high potential to do more. And that's called box 9. That's called the box of stars. And so how do we gravitate and see and show that we belong in the box of stars? And trust me, it's not just by talking your way into it. There's other things you need to do. And one of them is strategic alignment for your career. So, so what is that? What am I saying then? So you need to know not necessarily which job you want to do, but you need to know what is it that you're out to accomplish. And it can be very general. It can be, again, as I said, example, I want to become an executive one day. Great. I want to move, actually, I don't like management. I want to move in sales. But you've got to at least start with the what. And in fact, that's the first question that I ask people when I begin mentoring them. And mentoring typically is a 6-month engagement. And over the 6 months, we just work together on all sorts of things. But we start with saying, why are you here? Tell me, what is it you want? And that kind of begins to get information on what people think is lacking, what they're not satisfied with today. But starts off with what? And it's surprising me, when I was mentoring MBA students at Barclays, we had a graduate program where we would bring in maybe 20 graduates and they would go through an 18-month course. And I was typically a very popular mentor because I just love it, by the way, and I have all the time in the world for that. But it's amazing what I noticed when I talk to these individuals from University of Chicago, Cambridge, could be Harvard, one from Stanford, and they came into the organization, they didn't know what their career's all about. They'd never been asked that question. So that's essential to essentially what I'm saying is have a vision statement and say, what is it that I want from my career? And you list those things that you want. So I'm going to leave that there, but you get the point is that it's a very simple starting point, but it's incredibly interesting that not many people really think of it that way. And even more interesting that once you start thinking about it, it's actually harder than it looks. But once you get that what, then what I always like to ask is why? So why do you want to do it? I want to do this because I'm going to make more money. Great. Okay, that's fine. I want to do this because it's a sense of fulfillment. That's good too. I want to do this because I can't spend this much time at work and I want to, whatever the point might be. But why do you want to do it? That's your mission. So the first, what do you want to do is your vision. And then the mission is why you want to do it. And that's so important. I can tell you one of the most powerful drivers in a person's career is attachment to a sense of purpose. And so if you're tied to that sense of purpose, you have such a head start over so many people. In fact, I used to say 75% of the people that I work with, and remember, everybody wants to make more money. Everybody wanted to have a great career, et cetera, et cetera. But 75% of them weren't attached to a purpose. It was a job to them. And the whole focus today is say, how do you build that career? Something that says, you know what, it's purpose led. Well, that's your mission. That's your mission statement. And so why you want to do something is crucial. Okay, so I want to become an executive. Why? I'll tell you the exact answer that I gave in the interview one time when I went from entry-level manager to then a regional manager heading up a region of the United States. The exact answer was, I want to do this because I want to make policy, not just follow policies. And I had 3 interviewers. They're all 3 executives. They said, well, why is making policy so important to you? I said, because you guys sometimes make policies I disagree with, and I have no ability to influence that. And I know if I were here, I could actually help you create better policies that are much more relevant to the workforce. And they had a great laugh about that. It was kind of a risky tactic at that time, but I had a why that I wanted to do it. I wanted to be a person who could help lead and create policies that made a lot of sense and help structure the organization to make it actually easier for workers to engage in the work. Now, once you do the why, then the next question that we need to understand, and again, this is building your strategic alignment for your own career. Again, things that people don't think about. If you do this, you're going to be, honest to goodness, you're going to be more than the top 25%. You're going to be in the top 10%, maybe top 5%. But the key one is then how are you going to do it? So as we talk about what somebody wants to get through their career, you need to start understanding, how am I going to do it? Now, again, you can't specify I'm going to do this job, that job, and that job. Let me give an example. I started off my career in doing investment advisory work. So I essentially sold investments and advised customers on investment strategies. I liked it. I guess I projected that I was really interested more in having a career. My what was really in getting into management. I had a choice to make: forever be an individual contributor and grow a business that way, which is great. But I wanted to get into senior management and to management career. So my what was growing into management. So when I had that chance, I went into management, and over the course of the next few years, I became an executive of the investment advisory firm. And again, it's owned by a bank. So as I was there, I could see that my division was never going to be very big. We didn't make very much money. We were an afterthought for the overall banking organization. And so I viewed it as elevator banks. When you see elevator, this elevator shaft goes from 0 to 8 floors. This one goes from 0 to 24, and this one goes 0 to 76. So I shifted gears and I took a demotion. I went down 2 levels in the organization to become management in the elevator bank that went to 76 floors. And at the time, people said, "Are you crazy?" But I knew my how had to be, I want to have the bigger impact, and I want to go as high as I possibly can. I don't want to be the big fish in a small pond. I want to be a big fish in a big pond. And I truly believe in as a little bit of philosophy, I truly believe that the fish grows to the size of the pond that it's in. So I want to get in a bigger, if you bear with me on this, but bigger body of water. And I want to see, hey, you know what? I'm going to do this by going into the big organization and showing I can do ever more. In a couple of years, I became my boss's boss. So the person who managed me in the investment advisory business overall, and it was actually 4 years, I became the head of all of it, plus part of the bank. And so my boss actually started working for me. And that's got its own kind of unique feelings, but it feels good to succeed, and it felt good to not only be making policy but also having a broader influence in the organization. So a lot of the how is doesn't have to be fine. I never said I'm going to do this job, that job, and that job. A lot of it was reactionary, tactical, but generally it was guided by me saying I knew where I wanted to go. Okay, I knew why I wanted to do it, and the how then was going to be that I would do what it takes to get there. So I had to relocate my family several times as I moved up the career ladder, and then, as I said, it resulted in me becoming the president of the bank. So that's an example of what it takes to do have a strategic alignment. And if, as I mentioned before, it's so interesting when you talk to people about, why do you want this job, or the interviews. You guys, the secret to breaking out in your career, I keep saying the secret and then I give you 7 secrets, but one of the many secrets of breaking out in your career, besides having that sort of strategic alignment, some idea of what you're going to be doing, is to differentiate. Remember that the person interviewing you or talking to you about where your career is going to go is talking to 10 other people that are maybe 5, 10 other, it could be 20 people who all want the same thing as you. They say the same words as you, and they all went through their CV or resume in the same way that you're doing it. So how do you stand out? I can tell you, and I can promise you, to make a big difference if your interview is focused on the strategic alignment and where you want to head. You just get a different energy, and you start looking a little bit different than everybody else. And it's an advantage that a lot of people really don't stop and take advantage of that. And that's the beginning work when I'm working with somebody as a mentor. Now, I want to go to number 2 now, because number 2 is I kind of go back to the MBAs because it's an interesting, because I admire their educational journey and the work that they've done to get there. But what's interesting is they learned a very specific way to think about business in a very specific way. It's really driven into them in terms of how to take a left-brained approach into career and growing a career. In fact, they don't think about left-brain approach to careers. They think about a left-brain approach to business. And in my mind, I'm talking about something bigger than business. I'm talking about your life. So when I think about number 2, and what it is there's a lack, where are we here? A limited view of self. And again, sorry guys, if you can't read that, again, trust me on that. Limited view of self. So one of the foundational components of mentoring is to understand who you're working with. And it's interesting because I just pointed out a lot of people haven't thought about who they are. So you need to uncover that. And the problem is it's very difficult to get objective information on who you are. In other words, who are you? What are the things that you have as superpowers? I asked somebody, I interviewed somebody the other day for a role, and I asked, what are your superpowers? And they were stunned. Well, what do you mean? What do you mean? Don't you want to know my weaknesses? Yeah, we'll get to that. But it's so interesting. What are your superpowers? You need to have a view of that, and you need objective view. I don't know about you guys, but I have the hardest time coaching myself. I have a hard time talking to myself because there's a specific way that I think about myself and the way and it's just not objective. And what's really missing in most people in their career development and saying where do they want to go is a total lack of objective self-assessment. Your parents can't do it. They're not objective. Your boss doesn't do it. They give performance reviews to you, but they're not objective. They're telling you how you need to be in order to help them be successful. So performance review is uniquely designed to help the organization understand how you fit the organization's needs. I'm talking about a self-assessment that really helps you understand not only your superpowers, but also a really important thing, what I call derailers. Derailers. That says railer. So what is a derailer? So derailer is those things that we tend to do, and specifically under stress, that take all this wonderful work in strategic alignment, take all this work of, I know who I am, and I really understand my superpowers, and it just kind of derails it because we behave in a way that's not consistent with who we've announced that we are. We behave in a way that's inconsistent with who we've announced that we are. That's huge. Now you're confusing people. Now you're disconnecting people. Why? Because a stressful situation has come in and you've reacted. So it's really important to understand derailers. And by the way, when I said objectively assess these things, one of the key things that we really focus on with clientele is to say, listen, you probably, most people have a pretty good idea of their derailers, but I can promise you something. They actually magnify the derailers. The idea is not to identify things that perhaps people don't know. The idea is to say, how do we call them out and minimize their impact on your life? Look, if where your conscience is, or consciousness is to where your focus is, so many people beat themselves up every day for things that they've done. Could be 12 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, last year, something they said wrong, how they tend to they showed up poorly in a meeting, how they had a conversation with their partner in a different way. So the whole idea is that we think we have a good handle on derailers, but it's important to identify them in this conversation and then take the power away from them. If you think of yourself as a pie chart, and there's part of you that needs improvement, and let's say it's that 7%, the rest of you is pretty spectacular. Why do we ignore the pretty spectacular 93% and focus on the 7? And again, go back to that corporate performance review. What's the first thing they do? Oh, great job, you hit your goals, and you did some really good things, but I want you to get a book on this topic. I want you to go talk to so-and-so because they can show you how to stop doing this. And I want you to start thinking about how can you develop that. So all your focus goes on that 7%. So guess where your energy goes, your focus goes, your consciousness goes, is that 7%. I advocate a different approach. Let's talk now about superpowers. People don't do that enough. People understand, you know what, objectively, let's get all modesty aside or false confidence aside. Actually, I'm really good at these 2 or 3 things. And if I did more of those superpowers and I expressed those in more clear ways and I demonstrated them in moments of stress, then I focus on trying to fix these, guess what happens? Become much more confident. See, I look at your career, I look at your job that you're in today, I look at the job you're gonna be in 5 years from now. It's a performance. And so when you go to perform, you cannot perform if you don't have confidence, you're relaxed, you're focused on the task at hand, but you're allowed to perform, whether it's dancing, playing a musical instrument, or playing a sport, whatever it might be, you're performing is the way I like to look at it. And trust me, you do want to be aware, but quite honest about your assessment of your derailers, but spend more time growing your superpowers, and that 7% that needs to disappear gets consumed by you becoming more of your more super self. Now, I see a question. Let's see. Okay,
so
good.
There was no question. I just typed that people can type their questions, or if they want to show on the video, they can also unmute themselves and turn on their videos, whatever they feel like, and ask a question.
Thank you, Zarina. That was a nice little commercial break. Yeah, by all means, if you have questions or comments, Zarina, I don't have my glasses so you can see, I can't read them, but Zarina
sure.
will.
I'll read them out to you.
Yeah, and raise your hand if you want me to stop and go back to something. But so do you see now, as we're setting the table for 3 biggest limiters for those people that are joining a little bit later, but look, no strategy and no plan, no strategic alignment of what you want to do, why you want to do it, and how you're going to do it. That's a bunch of work, and I want you to start thinking about all of you today, no matter what you take from this webinar, think about that as it pertains to your career. Okay, next is for your career in life. A lot of people talk about work-life balance. Do you know, I have to say, just being very direct, I think that's nonsense. It's as if we're 2 people. And when I leave the door to go to work, I'm a different person than the one at home. There's no such thing as work-life balance. There's work, personal time balance, and there's focus, and you want to balance your focus, but you're the same person. So that same person, whether you're talking about, how to be a better business person or a better partner in your life, or friend to those that you're friends with, is understand an objective assessment of who you are. And that's what a mentor or coach can help you do, is understand sort of who are you, what are your superpowers, and what are those things that are derailers, and what are some, I've got some tools that I use with people to help them understand in that moment of truth, when I've got a chance to react, or if I can stop and be proactive, I actually can change how I've announced my own personal brand. And that's exactly what you're creating in an organization and a career. If you have aspirations to do more, if you want to make more money, you want to convey your personal brand in a way that's consistent with your values. And you want that to show up, whether it's a moment of stress or whether it's not. So you want to show up all the time. That's massively important for now moving, where are we, in the top 10%? Now we're in the top 5%. Now, if you're competing with 100 people for one job, now you're down to 5 people with one job. And by doing these two things, you've really enhanced your opportunities to grow your career or make your business more successful, or whatever the topic may be. Okay, the third career limiter. And again, this is observations from thousands of people that I worked with very, very consistently. And in fact, it's something that's becoming actually a bigger issue in my eyes. But this says that they're not clear on their company or their boss's motivation. Remember, people talk about bosses, executives becoming much more emotionally intelligent, much more empathetic, and understand both sides. Well, that goes two ways. And what I see a lot of people, and again, I'll pick on my friends, those of you that are MBAs, what you really have to battle is that you're very adept at expressing what they want from their career and what they want from their boss. And even the body language, just fascinating, absolutely fascinating. You can see the body language, and this isn't limited to people with an MBA, of course. I was just kind of teasing there a little bit, but there's a body language. I had one gentleman came in, and he was interviewing for a job, would have been a big raise for him. And he sat with his arm on the next chair, and he went on to tell me how if he got this job, it'd make his life better, and how this was a culmination of his life dreams. Well, that's great, but he had no idea of what the company, or in this case, I would be his boss, what my motivation was. What do I want? And when you think about it that way, if I can be overly blunt, I think we're all friends now. Look, a very important thing is what gets them fired. When you're thinking about growing your career, you've got to remember, just like you, your boss is trying to survive. And they have issues, they have problems. They're hiring somebody into a role, not just because they want to make people's lives better, which they all say they do, that's great, but they're putting somebody in an advanced role because they've got a problem. And they have trust that the person they're going to hire can solve that problem. Conversely, in their survival, what's going to get them fired will usually tell you where that problem lies. I've had people ask me, tell me a book that you're reading, with hopes that when I said there's a book I'm reading, it would say what I really needed, they need to focus on so it could help me solve that problem. Okay, maybe. They'd say, what keeps you awake at night, Mike? And always I gave some big answer that was very vague and very non-helpful. But instead, and again, I think it'd be overly bold to say what will get you fired. But if we could get to in part of the conversation, or if they intuitively knew, you know what, I read the latest annual report, I read the latest senior manager paper on certain things, and what Mike's going to be feeling pressure on is these 3 things, boom, boom, and boom. And then if you understand that, you're able to present yourself as a solution to those problems. And I can give you a specific example. When I started in financial services, I was having a hard time getting off the telephone. Again, I literally started on the telephone, answering the phone. And I was trying to get an interview. Why should we, put you through your licensing to become a financial advisor? And I gave all sorts of great, wonderful answers, whatever I would answer at the time, right? But one of the key things is that I said, tell me, what are your, at that time it was a gentleman heading up investment advisors in several bank branches. And I said, give me your toughest bank branches. I know all those people. and give me the toughest ones and I'll take it on. So he gave me 2 of the toughest ones, and I knew the managers and they were really tough. So, and I went in and I fixed that problem. And he said to me, I'll never forget, when he did my performance review, I'll never forget, you took 2 massive headaches away from me and it's just gone now. You just have solved it. So the point is, I knew, because I knew a little about the organization, I've done my homework, I knew what would get him fired and I knew what was giving him headaches. And I presented myself as a solution to that problem. So they're going to look at past performance, and too many leaders do this. If you're interviewing people, there's a big focus on past performance, but the whole idea is that we need to superimpose this person's skills and attributes into the next role. And that's a whole nother topic, but they're basically looking to build trust with somebody. Now, one of the key things is that you to build trust, it's not in the interview. It's not in the interview when you go. Now, if you don't know the organization, you don't know the individual, the interview is very important. But I can tell you that's not when you build trust. You build trust because you interview for the next position every single day at work. You just don't think of it that way. Every day you show up, you're interviewing for that next job. A lot of times when people go into, when a manager will go into a hiring mode and when we want to promote somebody, remember, it's not all about you. They have issues too. They have things that they need to solve. They have stuff that keeps them awake at night. But a lot of times they kind of know who they want to hire because they've seen a person every single day perform. They've seen a person every single day handle situations. They've seen a person every single day contribute to solving problems, not contribute to making problems. All those things happen on a daily basis. So if you think of, I'm interviewing for my next job, you may get a promotion tomorrow morning. I hope all of you do. And I hope it's because of this webinar. But if you go in tomorrow morning, get a promotion, I want you the very next day to show up and say, okay, I'm getting ready for the next role. It's got a magical effect on your performance, on your mindset, on your confidence, but also in the way that you become conscious of your behaviors and your actions, and most importantly, your impact on others. So when I mentor somebody, we focus a lot on this, how to show up every single day, how to solve your boss's problems, and how to begin announcing your candidacy for the next level, and how do you move to that box of stars at the upper right-hand corner of that 9-grid talent chart. So those are the 3, in my mind, those are the 3 biggest career limiters and those things that people do to hold themselves back. Now, obviously, each of these has a ton of more work and content, but it kind of points to the culmination of in the introduction to this webinar. I talked about stunning results. It can be stunning. It absolutely can be stunning, because remember this: whether you believe, it's really important of what you believe. And you don't want to have a false confidence. I mean, you don't have to believe and have total faith that you're going to become the CEO of the world's largest organization. You don't have to. That's not what I'm talking about. But I'm talking about if you believe in yourself in a process, you'll be amazed as you continue to think about that next job and the next job and where you're going. You've all suddenly start to think like the person in that job. I remember sitting there listening to the CEO. The president of the organization that I was in early in my career, and thinking, how did they know to say that? Why would they say that? I didn't like that, but I really did like that. That was really inspirational. I wonder what thought process led them to that. And I would go talk to, at that time, the president, saying, how did you think about that? What was your, and he would give some insights. It's like, okay, so now I not only know maybe what to say, I kind of know what not to say, but most importantly, I learned what's the thought process that somebody goes through to arrive at those things. And then how do you, over the course of time, wrap that thought process around who you are and a clear understanding of who you are. So you're always looking at the world in 360. So 360. So you're always looking at it where you're looking out and what are you trying to project, but you also want to watch and see the echo effect of your presence on the room you're in, on the person you're talking to, and then understand what they're saying to you. So you have a full loop of what you look like, somebody looking at you, and what you're trying to project. And all the time you're able to learn some things that will help you along the way on really how to think about things. So this is why I'm a massive proponent of mentors. A lot of people think I want to hire an executive coach, and that's fantastic, by the way. I don't mean that's not a really beneficial thing. It can really help. But what I really like to do and what really matters to my clients is the ability to connect and actually become friends and share wisdom during times or challenging people. I remember I went to a mentor when I had a challenging boss, and it was really tough. I just couldn't work together, and I took a career jog to go work for somebody that I really had more respect for. As things worked out, I ended up being the boss of that boss, and I actually invited them to go seek a career somewhere else because I remembered how their values just didn't align with mine at all. So having that mentor to say, give me some guidance, saying, you know what, you're learning something from this. Let's talk about what you're learning from this really difficult experience. Taught me a ton. So that's why I'm advocating, mentors. Executive coaches are phenomenal as well. And they both give you that sort of objective view of yourself, and can help you sort of develop that strategy and that plan of how you're going to go about growing your career. So that is what I want to share with all of you today. The last thing, I guess I mentioned stunning results. The one thing I want to add to this is that what is one of the most incredibly powerful learning experience I had was the power of stretching, the power of stretch goals. And it's really amazing what happens when you set a very stretch goal. Again, whether it's in your current job, remember I said that 9-box grid has an aspect of potential, showing that you've got potential to do other things. And then there's performance. Well, if you're in the job, you want to perform better. And if you think about how you want to drive that performance, if you're just talking about hitting goals, then you tend to focus on what is the minimum. But if you can create stretch goals, you don't have to tell anybody about it. Just set a stretch goal. Set a stretch goal for position, set a stretch goal for earnings, set a stretch goal for position in the company, whatever that might be, for performance that given you for how high you're going to hit your goals, and keep your own little stretch goal and make it really stretchy. I will guarantee you'll be shocked at how over the course of time you actually tend to accomplish the stretch number. I had one boss who would give me quarterly targets, give me minimum to keep your job. You do less than this, I'm just going to tell you in 3 months you're fired. Do target, which is the plan. This is what we've told everybody we're going to be doing, and your contribution to that plan is here. But give me your stretch. You give me your stretch. You come up with your stretch goal. And it was a phenomenal learning experience for me, because I could say I worked for that person for, 7 quarters only. But in every one of those 7 quarters, every single one, I hit the stretch goal. And by the way, not by much, by just a little. So when we're talking about things and talking about things around your career and setting a plan and saying where you want to go, I really want you to think about the power of stretch goals. Set it and let go of it. Go back to your target, go back to your plan, let go of it, but you'll be amazed at how you tend to gravitate towards, and the analogy that I'll give, and then Zarina, we can stop and have questions. But look, the analogy I would give is this. When you watch the Olympics, it's the only time I think about track and field. Okay, so when you watch the Olympics, a high jumper, there's a target, and they clear that target by 1 inch, 1 centimeter. They raise it, they run, clear it by 1 inch, 1 centimeter. They raise it, clear it, just clear it, right? Because that's their target. A lot of times that bar is wobbling. Even if they go on to 2 more successful jumps, they wobbled the bar at a certain level. That's a target. When you go watch the sprinters, they come to that starting line, and all of their preparation comes right there. And they benchmark themselves against their competitors left and right. And they give themselves permission to go and run as fast as they can. And I'm sure they have a number in mind. They have a speed in mind or an objective in mind, but they're giving themselves permission to perform as best they can in that moment in time to beat their competition and hopefully their target. That is a stretch goal. That means freeing yourself to say, I'm going to do things in a little bit different way. And in fact, it's why we changed the word when I was at Barclays, and we were trying to change the organization from one that just barely, in fact, we knocked the bar down quite a bit in our little high jump exercise. We didn't always hit our goals. We want to change it to an organization that went on to, we never did less than 30% of goal, 130% of our goal, because we changed the mindset from target to actually goal, and we quit talking about targets. So when you're thinking about your career and you're thinking about your journey and what you want to do, besides avoiding these three biggest limiters, I want to invite you to add something in there, which is stretch goals and stretch further than you can ever thought maybe possible. And you'll watch and see what happens, because it can come true. So with that, Zarina, let me stop there and see if you have any questions. If somebody would like to talk about anything I've said or add anything.
Allow me to please open up for questions with a question of my own, or rather an observation and a question. Of course, I understand the importance of stretch goals, but what got me thinking a lot was what helped me in my career progression when I was working back in corporate. And you talked a lot about MBA students, and I had also done an MBA. And I think, again, what we're talking about applies across the line, no matter if you have an MBA or not, or whatever you've done. And it made me think, the school that I went to ranked consistently in, I think, top 5 globally in career progression. And so I thought, what was the thing in this school that made people progress so fast? And the culture of recruiting. So one of the things that people were judged on to be recruited as students was collaboration. So this was the first thing that you could notice. So whenever I speak to somebody from the school that I graduated, I can immediately recognize them. It's just that they have a natural style of collaboration, of relationship building. And I was thinking, okay, what helped me actually grow in my career? Because I remember at some point I had 3 people inviting me to join their teams. And it was actually my exactly this collaborative style, and my reputation was working on its own. And what was actually working was the fact that I became friends with my bosses consistently. So they were, sorry, relationships.
Yeah, yes. A deeper relationship than just seeing them once in a while and not them not being aware of you. Yeah.
So, and I'm also thinking about people that I've spoken to. In the end, it's this informal relationship that you're building with the people around you that helps you move forward, because what people care the most is your personality. Of course, you need to perform, but this is it's like it's a given that you need to perform anyhow, but the choice will be made based on your personality rather.
Yeah, that's a really good insight. And by the way, you're correct in calling it out. I kind of poked at MBAs a little bit just because I mentioned so many of them. And the point was, this is really matters to everybody. In fact, you kind of can become a little bit set in your ways the more education you have, and kind of say, okay, I've learned the truth. In reality, you're exactly right. A lot of what I'm talking about is a relationship, and with who? The relationship with yourself. That's the beginning of everything. They call it insights for a reason. I want people to look inside and say, what are my derailers objectively? What are my superpowers? And how do I think about those? And then what is my way to react for stress? And we give tools to do that. So it's really important to start with understanding better yourself. Then you can understand, okay, now what about the organization? What about my boss? And ultimately, they're going to hire people they have trust in. And what creates a trust is a relationship. There's one person when I was at Barclays, and we had a situation in one of the African countries, and the government was looking at maybe even taking over our bank branches there, and it was really a big concern, obviously, for all the employees there. Well, I had one person who was actually two layers below me, maybe 3, by the way, might be 3 layers below me, but he has always just had a great persona. And he was always incredibly intelligent at the right time. But even more than that, he had a great relationship with all of his colleagues, and I got to know him. And so I would walk out in this particular situation, and I asked him, "Can you help me with this problem? I need somebody to look at this situation and say, how do we resolve this issue when it's going to be such a challenge for every blah blah blah, whatever the conversation was." The point of it is that we had established trust because I knew him on a deeper level. Why? Not because we went out and we hung out. No, we didn't. I didn't even know the gentleman in his personal life, but because I observed his performance at work and his interaction with other people. I know he'd be brilliant working with our African country head, and coming up with solutions that gave me some ammunition to go and talk to the government to keep our branches open. So that's just one example, Serena. Exactly right. This is about establishing a relationship with yourself and then with people that you work with, and certainly those include your bosses.
Yeah, and the other thing that I already mentioned, but I just want to stress on it again, is that your reputation, what you mentioned, you show up every day. Every day you're being selected for the next job, and so this is when your reputation starts working for you. Is what I also added, that at some point, in my example, I didn't know that news about me or my reputation had gone that far that people knew what I was doing and what I was capable of doing, so that they thought, okay, she might be appropriate for that job too.
Yeah, everybody here and everybody watching the recording later, one of the things you can do to that exact point, write down, I trust people when, and write down 2 or 3, 4, 5 things and say, when do you begin to trust people? I trust people when they're very consistent with who they are and what they are. Okay, good. When I can depend on them being there. I trust people when, and write those things down. And then look at that and say, is it outrageous or is it reasonable? And then take that list and superimpose it on your work environment and say, gosh, this is what other people must create that trust and create that relationship with somebody. And that is how you interview every day for a job, is build that trust by doing the same things that you appreciate. And it's such a simple exercise. But again, a lot of this is about consciously pursuing your career growth. And it's not about accidentally having a career. You want to, I mean, that's great if it works out, like winning the lottery, but you need to consciously approach the ways that you can grow your career, or by the way, this works for growing a business. And in fact, I don't want to overemphasize this, but relationships, it's massively important for your relationships outside of work as well. But that's not the focus of this webinar. The webinar is how to win at work and how to crack the code. And you notice all this way through, I haven't talked about politics. I had people that started off with me and they ended up trapped in the same levels. They really didn't ever move very much in their career. And when I was moving around and I was thinking, wow, what are these guys doing? Then it was almost always because they hadn't thought about a lot of these components, or thought about themselves in that way, and hadn't created a personal brand that reflected that they want to do anything different. So it was surprising to me that people don't do this type of work for themselves. But I can tell you, if you do it, you're differentiating. You really will stand out.
We have a question from Tosin Onibonohe. I'm not quite sure if I'm okay. I think it's pronounced. We hear a lot of people say work smarter, not harder. Do you agree? And fundamentally, what does it mean to you?
I know Tosin. How are you, Tosin? We worked together at Barclays years ago. Tosin would know some of the stories I was telling. You missed the best Barclays stories, but you came in just a little bit late, Tosin. So thank you. Good to see you again. Okay, so what does it mean by working smarter, not harder? Okay, so the focus can be, if I treat my career like digging a ditch. And when you dig a ditch, if you don't work hard, nothing's going to happen. If you sit there and think about it, the hole doesn't get dug. So you need to dig and you work harder. Okay. But in a career, there are those people that do that. And in fact, it happens quite a lot to women. Think of the classroom setting. I'm going to switch analogies now. Think of the classroom setting and seat 1A. Actually, be there right here. 1A is right there, and that's the best student in the class. And she's sitting there and she's doing a great job getting all the right papers. She's working really hard and getting straight A's and everything else. And she goes to work at an organization, and she is working super hard and doing the right things. And yet she sees she's not getting chosen for those next jobs. She sees other people who are somehow conveying funds. In fact, what's happened is a lot of times she has become too valuable in her position. Now, this happens to men as well, but in this particular example, I'm using the female representation of this issue. But working harder is not the answer always. Working smarter says, how do I think of myself in a holistic way? And how do I think of my role in the company in a holistic way? And how do I accomplish what the company needs at its current level, but how the company can help me with my needs in the next level? And how do I create relationships and build a bridge that makes that happen? A lot of times people, as I was going to say, that get stalled in a certain place, it's not because they're not top performers, it's not because they're not smart, and it's not because they don't work hard. Although a lot of people have those attributes, it's a lot of times it's not because of that. A lot of times it's just simply because they haven't actually thought about where they fit in the overall scheme and try to say, how do we express ourselves in a different way? How do we kind of go for it? How do we make these things happen? These three biggest mistakes I mentioned. But in that process, there was a great phrase, and I've kind of drifted away from the great phrase. But in the process of understanding that, they then say, "Well, it's just politics, Mike. You succeeded because you were, you knew so and so, or you used to, golf with so and so, or you used to." And quite honestly, a lot of times when you hear people talking about politics, it's somebody who hasn't cracked the code. And that's why I named this webinar "Cracking the Code," because there is a code, but the code's written by you. It's not, yes, there are organizations that are extremely political, and you have to be one of the good old boys to succeed, or you have to be from that place, or you have to have gone to the right schools, or something that you can't control at this point. And at that point, I'd ask you to check your values and see if this is the right place for you. But a lot of times people that get stalled focus on the external as the issue. And almost always, I can guarantee you, Tosin, that your success depends on you and how do you see yourself in the entire organization in a holistic way. It's a long-winded way to say working smarter means you have a plan. Okay. The beginning of my webinar was a strategic alignment for your career, just like an organization has strategic alignment. What are you going to do, why you're going to do it, and how are you going to do it? Just by doing that step number one alone, never mind the introspective things I've mentioned, but just by doing that one thing alone, you will begin to say, how can I work smarter for effect? Not necessarily work harder so that I'm too valuable in my position to get promoted. So that would be my answer. Does that make sense?
There's another question. Yes, absolutely. Let me just read the other question. How much of moving through an organization is tapping into other superpowers?
Perfect. I think it's incredibly important. If we go back to the word relationships, if you see somebody who is just killing it, somebody who has something that you kind of admire about them, they're doing something in the way that you like it, establish a relationship and understand, what are they doing? Most importantly, how do they think about what they're doing? How they arrive at that? Were they born with that gift? Again, if it's some sort of athletic endeavor, sometimes just somebody's more athletic, but especially in the workplace, tapping other person's superpowers is a massive way to learn things and see what sort of fits. It's like trying on a different pair of shoes and see, does this work for me, and how do I adapt it for my purpose? I had a boss, Tom, one time, who, and by the way, Tom is my nephew, just moved to Texas and is launching his career. But Tom, I had a boss one time who was a real driver. It was just his personality. And when you do those personality profiles, he was a heavy D, had to be in control, had to be the alpha dog, and had to, tell people and how to command and control type of structure. It was his superpower. It really allowed him to grow his career up in the organization. And so at one point in time, I thought, I'm going to copy this. I'm going to take this from him, and I'm going to do the same thing because it seems to work. And I've never done so poorly in my life. I've never done so poorly in my life. The people that I worked with didn't like me. It wasn't me. It wasn't anything about me. And so I learned something important, is that his superpower was not my superpower. Likewise, I had another boss who created a vision for the future, who said, hey, here's what can happen. Here's the vision of the future. And the smart person will understand how to navigate the world and arrive at that vision when the organization goes there. What was the vision? We were going to go from 54 branches and buy a bunch of other banks and go to 250 branches. Okay. I loved it. That really motivated me. A great motivation. And so the motivation comes from outside, inspiration comes from inside, and it inspired me, motivated me and inspired me to then go and, gosh, I want to be part of this. And I wanted to get in that part of the organization. We ended up with 2,000 branches as it turned out, but that vision really, really helped me. So I took that and I adapted it when I went into advanced leadership roles, and but I did it in my way. So Tom, a long-winded way of tapping into other superpowers. Yes, as long as it fits your values and who you are, and you can take those things, you can morph them to suit your purposes, so that it's your authentic self. Life is not very fun when you can't be yourself, and so you want to win the game of a career game, and you want to do it by taking advantage of all the relationships and tools at your disposal, but you need to do it in your way, in your unique self, and that's part of the discovery. Tom, does that make sense?
Tosin responded, perfect sense. Thank you. This was to the previous question.
Well, Tosin
yes,
is a
makes sense from
okay,
Tom as well.
Thanks, Tom. Tosin's a superstar. So it is really great to see her name here today, because she's just a superstar. So it's really fun to see your name. So thank you, Tosin, for being here today. As you can tell, I get kind of excited about certain things, certain aspects of career and career planning. And I can't emphasize enough the need to have a career plan. And it doesn't mean, again, that you know the next role. It doesn't mean, again, that you've got the specific steps you're going to take, but it means you've got an overview of where you're going with your career, that you understand yourself a little bit better, and you understand the environment that you're working. And to me, it's shocking that a lot of people don't understand the environment that they're working and how they can solve problems. A lot of times people can approach interviews and say things like, here's what I want to do. I've done some operations, I've done some marketing, I've done some sales. So my next challenge is P&L responsibilities. P&L responsibilities. Okay, great. That's what you want. But tell me, I'm interviewing you to see how do you, I need to hire somebody who I trust, who I think is going to solve my problems. How do we bring this together so you get what you want and I get what I want? And it's not a cafeteria approach. And that's one of the things that if I'm underscoring my whole message today is think carefully about these three things, but also think about when you see your place in the organization. The organization's not there to help you hit your goals. It's a mutual understanding that you'll hit your goals when you help the organization hit its goals. And and the more you understand that, and the more you can think about it strategically, not just tactically, then the more you can move up into management, and that announces yourself and your personal brand as a person with high potential. So I hope that makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mike. I really enjoyed it. I could relate to every point, and I could keep giving examples of where I've discovered what you were mentioning, but I don't need to make it all about my ego here to share. Oh, I recognize it, but I did recognize a lot of the points that you mentioned.
Thank you, Zarina. And the reality is, in one hand, it's way simpler than people think. On the other hand, what is more complex than trying to understand yourself and your motivations and what you want to do? It's extremely complex. And I wish I could give examples for your career. I've known Zarina for just the past couple of years. We met in Vienna when I went to make a presentation on corporate culture, and we met and have become friends since then and worked together. And again, that's what I do with the people that I mentor. We become friends and get access to my network. So I'm really happy to support your work, Zarina. And like I said, whenever you need me, I'm there.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mike. So if there are no further questions, I guess we can close today's session.
You bet. And it's going to be exciting to see. I want to see how many people watch, because I think I had 88. What did you say? 88, almost 100 people that were signed up. But I think a lot of people are in different time zones. I know one person is in Malaysia, so she's going to be obviously a whole different time zone than we are here in Seattle. But anyway, so I think a lot of people watch the recording. So for those of you that watch the recording, I hope this makes sense. And look, you guys can find me at amatosparks.com. My point is, it takes sometimes just one small spark to kind of get your career moving. Hopefully today was a small spark that got things going for you and helped you think about your career differently. But you can find me there. And if you watch the video and you're not on the call today and you want to reach out with questions that you obviously couldn't ask in person today, then please do let me know. I'd be happy to work with you, happy to help you, and to meet you. Thanks.
So just to mention that you offered for anybody who refers the attendance at the Game of Leadership Summit a 10% off of your personal mentoring program. So for anybody listening, again, amatosparks.com, you can reach out to Mike and get a 10% off for his mentoring program.
Thousands of dollars in savings, thousands.
Yes. Thank you so much, Mike.
Thanks, Serena. Thanks everybody for joining today. We'll talk to you all soon, I hope.
Bye. Have a great day.
Cheers.